I think I was here back during the campaign, and my first comment is it's a whole lot more fun to be the governor than it is to run for governor. Several folks have even asked me, like, well, it does feel like it'd be a little intoxicating being governor. Everywhere you go, people clap for you, and no matter what you do, they tend to laugh at your jokes, etc. And how do you keep from having that go to your head? I said, well, I have frequent reminders. I was at a UT football game last fall. That's one way to keep humble. If y'all, those of you who are Vanderbilt fans, go ahead. I'll just take it for a second. But I was at a UT football game, and I ran into a guy who I hadn't seen in a long time, and he said, have you come to all the games this year? I said, well, I haven't really come to as many since we're in Nashville. I don't get back quite as much. He goes, Nashville? He goes, did Pilot move you to Nashville? I said, no. I said, I didn't. I said, no. I said, I don't work for Pilot anymore. He goes, well, what do you do? And he goes, so well, actually, I'm the governor of Tennessee. And he goes, no way. That's a true story. For people who know you best. I love the little brother-brother exchange back there. We have that same thing going in our family. Nice talk about starting work in the family business, and usually this thing about the company grew from, when I started there, having 400 employees, when I left had 14,000, et cetera, et cetera. And I said the only bad part is ever since I left, they've made more money and grown faster than when I was there, and I try not to take it personally. Here's what I'd love to do real quick, is to talk a little bit about kind of what we're doing in Tennessee, and then I will leave. We got started early, so I will leave a good amount of time for questions for whatever you want to talk about. Also, just noticed I'm perilously close to the edge of the stage, so if I fall over, you'll shut off the TV cameras really fast. Well, let me kind of start with the good news in Tennessee. Really due to what I think is a very fiscally responsible legislature, and actually, quite frankly, a history of fiscal responsibility in Tennessee. We're in great financial condition, and I won't take all the credit for that, like I said, because there's a lot of people before us. As a matter of fact, as a Tennessean, you owe either the second or third least amount in debt per person in the state for what the state owes. And I'm not taking on personal debt for everybody here. That's just in terms of what the state owes. In terms of state's debt and pension fund liability, we're second or third from the bottom per capita. Again, that shows a history. We're also the second or third lowest in taxes paid per capita in Tennessee. Total, if you add up all the tax, not counting your federal, all the state and local taxes you pay per person, Tennessee, we're at the very bottom. One of the interesting challenges when we came into office was I came into office January of 2011, was sworn in. Right about then, the stimulus plan money that President Obama had proposed and Congress had passed a year and a half before that, or actually more than, I guess 2 years before that, was starting to run out. And so states were losing a lot of money. And essentially, I just came from the National Governors Association in Washington this week, where I think 41 or 2 of the nation's 50 governors are all together. And it's interesting because you have a chance to exchange ideas and thoughts. And unlike in your business or in the business I used to be in, you can talk to people who are doing the same thing that you're doing and exchange ideas. I mean, if you work for Coke, you don't sit down with Pepsi real frequently and talk about, so what are you all doing about this strategy or that? But as a governor, we compete for jobs with each other. But other than that, most of the time, there's no harm in exchanging information with each other about everything from what are you doing about higher education to prisons to Medicaid. But it was interesting in talking with governors about the different approach. When that money ran out, everybody did different things. You should be proud of your state. And again, I'm not taking the credit because there's a whole lot of people. But when that money ran out, we lost about $1.5 billion out of a $32 billion budget. When that money ran out, we did not raise taxes. As a matter of fact, we cut taxes. We have lowered the sales tax on groceries. We've eliminated the gift tax, which you had to pay in Tennessee. We were one of only 2 states that had a gift tax, and we don't usually like to be in that neighborhood when it comes to tax policy. We're in the process of eliminating the inheritance tax, which was literally chasing people out of Tennessee who decided it was cheaper to die elsewhere. And so we've eliminated that, and we're slowly cutting away at the Hall income tax, the tax that is owed on income and on interest and dividends. The other thing we didn't do was increase our borrowing. Like I said, we have one of the lowest per capita debt rates. We're a AAA rated state, which does matter. People say, well, all that sounds great. So you pay a little bit less in interest costs. But State of Illinois, week before last, put a bond offering out that they had to pull back because they couldn't sell it because of their both their debt and their pension fund obligations. So it does matter to you that you have a state that has a good balance sheet, just like you want your business or your family to have a great balance sheet. It's the exact same thing. So we didn't raise taxes, we didn't go out and borrow a bunch of money, and then the other thing we didn't do is we didn't, like I said, raid our own savings account. Matter of fact, we're adding back to that. Tennessee's what we call a rainy day fund, what you would call a savings account, at one point in time before the recession got up to about $750 million. During the tough times, they had to take that down. It got down, these are round numbers, but to about 250 million. We added 50 million back in our first year, 50 million our second year. In the budget that I just proposed, we're going to add another 100 million back. Just with the idea that we know other rainy days are coming. One of those challenges is this. Like I said, I just left spending the weekend in Washington. As you can imagine, all the conversations about sequestration and fiscal issues, etc. I'm in the camp that says Washington needs to solve the problem. We can't keep going on spending more than we're bringing in. It feels really basic to me. One of the implications of that, though, is that the federal government is going to send less money to the states. It is just going to happen. I don't know how everything's going to work out in Washington, but one thing I do know is I think we will be receiving less money from the federal government than we have in the past. So I think it's smart for us, again, to be as fiscally conservative as we can now, knowing that, again, a lot of the funds that we have will go away. The other thing we did not do when the money shrunk up was we did not cut education spending for K-12 education. And some of you might go, well, that's kind of a no-brainer. Of course you wouldn't cut that. But we're actually one of only 14 states that haven't cut education funding in the last 2 years. As a matter of fact, last year's budget, our percentage increase in education was the second highest of the 50 states. That's not a neighborhood that Tennessee has traditionally been in. Quite frankly, we haven't funded education as well as some other states. But we made the commitment to do that. We also made the commitment to add another 51, beyond our normal funding, to add another $51 million in technology funding for the local schools. Some of you, if you have school-age children who go to public schools, you're familiar with the TCAP test. It's the standardized test that our students take to measure their progress. Starting next year, we're going to switch to something called, from the TCAP to something called the PARC, which stands for I don't know, something readiness for college. I can't remember the P. Somebody here might know, but something readiness for college and career. But the gist of all that is a lot of the tests will actually be taken online, which begged the question of who was going to pay for all the equipment that was going to go into schools. And so we stepped up and said, we'll do that. We believe in this process enough. We don't want to put the local schools behind the eight ball to do that. We also realize, though, that just throwing money at education is not the answer. As a nation other than Singapore, we spend the second most, I think this is right, the second most per student on education of any of the countries, and yet our results aren't there as a country. So we know it's not just about throwing money at it, but we're making those other things. As you referred to in the introduction, we've reformed the process for how you get tenure. Prior to this in Tennessee, if you taught for 3 years in one day, you were granted tenure, which was pretty much a job for life. But you say, well, okay, that wouldn't be so bad. What's the standard for getting tenure? Well, about 96 or 97% of the people who taught for 3 years were granted tenure. And so you can't tell me that's a high enough bar to give somebody a lifetime, what was basically a lifetime right. So we changed that. We also have changed the evaluation procedure for how you measure teachers. When we did that, this time last year, people were screaming, saying, every teacher is going to quit. We're going to see massive retirements due to this new evaluation process. Well, we charted the trajectory of retirements last year, and quite frankly, it didn't change. What did change was our lower rated teachers retired at a faster rate. Our better teachers decided to stay on a more frequent basis. So we're making those changes. As one of the, you say, well, prove it to me. Prove to me that the results are there. Last year, 55,000 more kids tested as proficient in math, and about 37,000 more in science. We've had double-digit graduation rates. There was an article in the paper last week, really going back even to before we got there. That process has started. And last year's TCAP test, our standardized test, showed the largest aggregate gains in state's history. So we're making real progress there. Obviously, the other big area that we have focused on, and really that all governors are focusing on right now, is job creation. And unemployment has moved down in Tennessee. Some of that is a reflection of the national trends, but we basically moved down a little faster than the nation's average. But some of the encouraging things are that the places where we're focusing, we're seeing results. Last year, Tennessee led the Southeast, both in pure numbers and in percentage increase in manufacturing jobs. I'm somebody that still believes that manufacturing jobs are at the heart of what we do and show a strength that other things don't show. So showing that, being, like I said, being number one in the Southeast last year in manufacturing jobs, I think really is significant. As a state, we've taken the state up and divided up into 9 different regions with a very different economic focus there. And we're basically the idea of building on the assets and strengths that we have. And I've met with everybody in the last month, from Volkswagen to FedEx to Walmart to you name it. And I honestly think we have a real opportunity to continue to capitalize on that as a state. I think that whole idea of building on your strengths and marketing to that is working, and I think we can continue to see that happening. The last area of focus that we have, and then we'll talk about whatever you would like to, is on the area of higher ed. One of the initiatives I announced in the state, which I guess we gave 3 or 4 weeks ago, was this whole idea that in Tennessee, far too few of us have a post-secondary degree. I announced what we're calling the drive to 55, that 55% of our population by the year 2025 would have at least a 2-year degree. You say, well, where are we now? Right now we're at about 32%. So, okay, we're at 32, you're wanting to get to 55. I guess the next question will be, well, how'd you pick 55? It's because 55% is the number of it's the estimate of the percentage of new jobs that will require at least a 2-year degree in the next 10 years. Okay, so if 55% of the jobs are going to require a degree and we only have 32% that do, well, everybody can see the problem. So we felt like our mission is to go ahead and attack that around the things that are limiting that. There's 3 or 4 things that are limiting that in Tennessee. The biggest one, quite frankly, is a cultural mentality. Whenever I make this point at a talk, somebody raises their hand and says, well, college isn't for everyone. And I say, amen, it's not for everyone. But it has to be for more Tennesseans than it's been for in the past, or we can't compete. And so some of it is about changing a culture and changing an expectation level. One of the things we've started across the state is something called Tennessee Achieves, which would basically, community by community, we're opening up a program that says, if you keep a minimum GPA and apply for all the financial aid you can go to 2 years of community college totally free. We started that in Knoxville when I was mayor, where it's spreading out in other counties around the state, and it's making a significant difference in this. Many of us in this room just grew up assuming that you would go to school beyond high schools. Your parents did, your friends did, most of your friends that graduated from high school with you did. But that's not the assumption of a lot of Tennesseans. And so it became about changing expectations. Part of that is saying, oh, by the way, you can do that. And so when you tell people, hey, you can go to 2 years free, all of a sudden that starts to change the expectation level of a lot of first-generation Tennessee students. So that is a big emphasis for us. The other big emphasis is trying to make certain that we're doing our job in state government of allocating capital for higher ed. If you're running a business, I'd argue the most important thing you do is allocate capital, right? No matter what kind of business you're running, that's the most important thing. Who you hire and how you allocate capital. Those are the 2 most important things you decide as a business person. Same thing's true in state government. Who we hire, because we run this 40,000 person operation, but also how we allocate capital. And in the past in higher ed, I can't say we've always been strategic about that. It's been, okay, what's the next building that's up on the list? So we've been waiting for a new humanities building at East Tennessee State University, it's next. Or we need a new science building at Walter State Community College, it's next. Without being strategic about listening to the market and having the market say, here's what we need right now. So what we've tried to do is turn that on its head and say, the market is saying we need these things. We need more engineers. We need more welders. We need more truck drivers. We need more nurses. All those things, and so we're allocating our capital along those lines, which I hope will make certain we're providing the spots that are available for the people who would be trained for the jobs that actually are required. That's a little bit different mentality for higher ed. So in higher ed, we're trying to attack the cost side, making certain we haven't priced middle class families out of college, making certain that we address the quality side, making certain that we are producing the graduates that businesses are really saying that they need, and then finally making certain that we address the access side, that we're going out to Tennesseans and saying, you really can go to college, here's how it can happen. If you ask me the things that we're doing right now that I'm the most excited about, it's a lot of the efforts around higher ed. I'll give you one example. There's 800,000 adult Tennesseans who have some college credit but not a degree, okay? If we're going to get to 55% of our population have a degree, we're going to have to address some of those folks. Now, a lot of those, the typical person that fits that criteria is a 37-year-old single mom with 2 children who's working 40 hours a week. Now, let's just say she wants to get a degree. How possible is that? It's pretty hard, right? You're raising 2 kids, you're working 40 hours a week, 37 years old. There's no way you're going to go back and sit through, a full semester's worth of classes. We're starting something this year called WGU Tennessee. It stands for Western Governors University, a model that some Western governors put together several years ago. It's targeted at that adult who has some college credit, but not enough for a degree. It's an online, competency-based, accredited university. So it works like this. Just say you've been working as a bookkeeper. That 37-year-old mother, say she's a bookkeeper. And she's got some college credit, but she's got a whale of a lot of experience. And she decides, I want to go get my accounting degree. Well, rather than start back at Accounting 101 at her local community college, she actually can go take an online competency-based test that says, oh, by the way, you know a lot more than most people who've had 3 semesters of accounting because you've been doing bookkeeping for 15 years. And so her competency tests are out, and then we have mentors both available online and real-time in person who can help her as she works her way to where she can finally get a degree. It's innovative concepts like that, tapping the capacity of the internet, that I think will change, again, both the achievement level and the expectation levels of Tennessee. So I'm going to stop right there. I have a few things I'm going to say to wrap up, but I guess I'd conclude this. Like I said, it's always kind of encouraging for me to go spend time with other governors because, one, I always learn a lot, but number 2, you compare your situation to other folks. And if we're competing with the other 49 states, and we're not purely competing with them, but in some things we are, I like where we are. We have a strong balance sheet. We have a low cost of operation. We have a great physical location, and we have a education and economy that's headed in the right direction. So, with that, I will stop, and we will talk about anything that you'd like to, and I'll get you out of here on time too, I promise.